Hello. Welcome to Teaching Artistry with Courtney J. Boddie. That's me. This is a podcast that celebrates artists and advocates for community engagement. And this is We Can't Go Back, a video series in partnership with Creative Generation meant to examine, interrogate, and confront racist policies and systems in the arts. This series amplifies leaders in the arts and culture who drive radical change in communities through anti-racist and liberatory practices. Subscribe to the Teaching Artistry with Courtney J. Boddie YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I identify as a cisgendered woman, and I am always uplifting and paying respect to my ancestors from across the African diaspora, stolen from their native lands and within the US. Today, I am thinking about my mother, Rosalind Boddie, who passed away a year ago and is now one of my ancestors and holds me in golden light. I have the privilege to work and live on the stolen lands of the Munsee, Lenape, and Canarsie nations here in Brooklyn, New York, for which I am thankful. And I pay respect and uplift the indigenous diaspora who are also woven into my DNA and my history through a network of solidarity and love. Let's welcome our panelists for today, Christina D, Eskridge, and ChelseaDee Harrison. Hi, Christina. Hi, ChelseaDee.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to have you join me. So why don't we get into who you are? Can you share with us your role in theater and or arts education? And if you'd like to share anything else beyond that, that'd be great.
I'm Christina D. Eskridge. I'd like to acknowledge that I hail from the land of the Muwekma tribe, and that is where I was born in Oakland, California, today known as Oakland, California. I currently reside on the unceded land of the Wappinger and Munsee Lenape. I am the founder and executive director of the Elevate Theater Company. We began this year in this 2020 pandemic because we felt the need to provide space for our audiences and artists to explore health and well-being, especially now, through the art of storytelling. I'm also a teaching artist, a performing artist, a director, a playwright, and I work in healthcare as a healthcare consultant.
All of the hyphens, just a multi-hyphenate creative.
That's you too.
I know, right? I'm ChelseaDee Harrison. I am on the ancestral lands of the Nacotch, Tank, Anacostan, and Piscataway peoples, also known as Washington, D.C. We are not a state. We are still fighting for statehood. So that's on the docket. And I am a theater maker. And I use that term very broadly because it's like everything. I produce, I curate, I write. I'm a teaching artist and my focus is theater. And I'm also a producer of arts events. And so theater making is it's my world, it's what I do. And I help people to unlock their artistry through my teaching. So that's kind of me.
I've had both of you on my list of guests for since sort of conceiving of this particular video series and in general, frankly, but the catalyst for the invitation was based off of the first part series that Elevate Theater had a few weeks ago, and I was there for it. Oh, it was so good. I mean, I would have gone anyway because I like to support as many of my artists' creative community as possible. But once I was there, I was like, oh my goodness, this is literally one, speaking to my theater maker self, two, speaking to like something deep inside that I don't know how to describe, but like I've always felt that reproductive rights, women's health rights are crucial and so incredibly important to stop having people legislate women's bodies. It's fucking ridiculous, to be honest. And I had sort of forgotten that. And I have a theater company that focuses on not forgotten, but I shifted my focus, let's say. And so there was a moment in watching your piece and the conversation that follows. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But there was a part of me that sort of one was a reminder, but also all the things that you've been fighting for actually do involve this as well, that anti-racism and liberatory practices and feminist practices are important, like feminarchy, like literally, that's all I talk about is feminarchy. So it was all like you're pressing all the things that were a moment for me to say you can actually focus on more than one thing, and in fact the intersections of it all is what is important. So with that said, I also know you obviously from the New Victory, so I love and adore both of you. So let's get into it. So let's talk about some of the ways that you embed anti-racism practices into your work.
Part of the work that I'm trying to do with Elevate is really to examine through the lens of an artist's work, right? Take the artist's expression, whatever that expression might be it anger, excitement, joy, fear. Let's take that, expose it, pull it apart, and then let's juxtapose that with a panel of folks who are experts in that particular field. And so if we can tell stories from the lens of those who are having that experience, whether it be rooted in the statistics or not, right? I don't require that any of our artists give us the statistics or the sort of facts behind the feelings that they are expressing on our right now virtual stage. But then if we can supply our audience with folks who are experts in that field and have experience in that particular health topic, then I think we break down some of the just some of the narratives that have been portrayed in white supremacy and that are sort of continually portrayed, right? We using the Fun Shack as a perfect example, ChelseaDee did an amazing job of juxtaposing the courtroom scenes with actual experiences of our characters. And these courtroom scenes were exaggerated. I'll let you talk about it more, but they really did hone in on some of the white narratives that are happening around Black women's bodies, around women's bodies specifically. And then we got to hear from a physician, a doula, and a policy advocate who all have experience in this space from different lenses. And they can really talk about how we break that down in real life. And we have a call to action afterwards. So with Elevate specifically, I'm really trying to have the artist make the expression, invite the audience in, and then provide them with expertise and information on what to do next.
ChelseaDee, can you talk about the Fun Shack? I remember in the panel discussion, you talked a little bit about the inspiration, but what is the play about? How did you, how were you inspired to write it?
It's so great you ask about like, where does anti-racism live in your practice? And I feel it's foundational for my work, and I didn't ever have the language of that. And I feel like it's only recently become like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's what's happening. And so I think that so much of my creative process and so much of what I'm interested in is this practice of naming. Let's name it. Let's say what this is, so that we can begin the process of empowering ourselves to do something. First, we have to acknowledge where we are. So the Fun Shack is a play that was inspired by two articles that I read that were actually written by two, I think, I actually don't know how they identify, but femme presenting journalists who were writing about one article was from BuzzFeed, and it was about these frontline healthcare workers who have, they've run an abortion fund out of their house, and they live in the Deep South, and it's a family of Black women, and they help people get abortions. And this article was written during a time where there was a lot of really restrictive, people were calling them like abortion bans, like really restrictive laws were being passed.
Right?
Yes, it was a heartbeat bill moment. And so, and yet you had this family who was working and like still doing things. And I said, that's so fascinating. And then I read another article by Linda Villarosa that talked about the infant mortality and maternal mortality that was severely impacting the Black community, which I did not know about and was devastating when I started to really think about the scale of it. So I think back to this practice of naming. I was like, we have to call this what it is. We have to release the taboo around talking about, our bodies, what's happening with our bodies, how our bodies, how we're helping and loving our bodies. And so that was the impetus behind the Fun Shack. Did I answer the question?
You answered that specific question, but I do think that the original question was, how do you embed anti-racism practices, which you did touch on, but I wanted to give you space to envelop or elaborate if you wanted to.
There was Courtney, she's like a thinker, she's an educator that you introduced me to when we were first kind of talking about anti-racism practices at the New Victory Theater, Dr. Goldie.
Yes, Dr. Goldie.
Something.
I believe.
Yes. But she spoke a lot about Black excellence and how are we celebrating, centering Black excellence, and how are you approaching the history of Black excellence in your curriculum, in your organization, in your wherever you are. Are you addressing it? And if you have an issue with Black excellence, the concept of Black excellence, what is this revealing of you and your priorities? And do you need to really be working with people outside of, obviously who you're comfortable working with? So the way that she framed it, though, for me was like, oh, this is why it's foundational, because I don't know, maybe it's coming from DC. There's just such a rich, deep history in this whole Tidewater region. Like there's such deep history in this region of like Black people doing really dope, radical, and this is all across the country too, all across the world. I mean, anti-Blackness is global. I just love this idea that, if you are centering Black excellence and you are bringing a lot of options in how we can approach Black excellence, how we can approach resilience, how we can approach joy, how we can approach rest and restorative justice, these things, this is foundational to just how I see the world. And I think it's because it's the air I breathe. I feel like it's in the land, like it's in the soil, an anti-racist practice, because I exist. You know what I mean? And if you have a way of thinking that says I shouldn't,
you're wrong.
You're wrong. You are wrong. I have none of that.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's foundational.
You brought up the Black Literary Society. I think it came up in the conversation actually after the Fun Shack, and I was reminded of that as well. A couple of things that come to mind as you were speaking, Chelsea. Something that I've noticed that you're starting to do very intentionally, and I'm here for it, is talking about the genius and that moment where we can start to go a little negative. You somehow are able to sort of say, yeah, but look at all this great stuff that you've done. Mm-hmm. You did it with us before we started recording. You did that for Christina, and I saw that, and I was like, oh, I need, like, that's something that you build in, like radical love, revolution. Mm-hmm. That's a part of it. And the restorative piece is huge. It's huge. I was listening to a radio show in NYC, I think it was the Brian Lehrer show, and there was an associate professor from Teachers College who was talking about how in terms of remote learning and what's lost and that we what actually can be gained. Mm-hmm. Is where, and he had such like strong energy that I was like, I need to know this person. I need to meet you, because that's how I've been trying to talk about the work that we do, is like approaching from an asset bearing point of view, and thinking about, trauma informed practices is not to highlight the trauma itself, but to just highlight the triumph and the resilience, but the joy that we all have, and that the arts actually have a beautiful avenue for all of that, right? And then the other thing I was thinking about as you were talking was, our thinking about school and the arts, and it's all predicated on white supremacist constructs and that are just baked in, right? And so to shift that, we have to sort of acknowledge our own technology. Yep. That the Black community, Black people, we have the technology to be able to push past like that. But wouldn't it be great if we could do more than survive with that technology, but actually thrive? And
Mm-hmm.
you said, Chelsea, the acknowledging and the changing what the expectations of what things should look like to meet some sort of benchmark needs to shift, because it's all based off of poop.
Compost.
And the idea of like understanding that you have to look at history in order to be able to talk now. You cannot pull them apart. I read something this morning. There was a Facebook post about, it's actually from Toya Lillard, who's been a guest on this show multiple times, because she just speaks truth to power, right? She says, that there was she loves stats. So she said that there was like 42% of the Black community said that they would take the vaccine, which meant that there was, at least 58 that would not. And the tone and the rhetoric from that was, well, we need to help educate them, as opposed to talking about the legacy of doing experiments or policing Black bodies, and the lack of healthcare, and the lack of or good healthcare opportunities for those in our community. So why would they literally now, why would anybody trust? So those two pieces were completely disconnected. And then there was the they don't know what's best for them bullshit.
Yeah.
There's this parental or patriarchal, oversight on the health and education of Black bodies. And that is something that I'd like to dismantle as well, right? Chelsea did such a great job. That last scene with Glory's monologue is really that vision for the future, right? It is what it should be. And the choice that Glory makes to actually stay in the shack, right? But build something around that space, to stay on where her foremothers, the land that her foremothers gave her, but then build around that, build above that, build beyond that. I think is really what we're talking about, right? Like taking your history, knowing what it is, knowing why there are damaged relationships between the healthcare industry and system and Black people, and being able to say, okay, here's where we're starting from. Let's build around this. Let's build with this informing the next steps. And I think that's what's so frustrating about this narrative that, with COVID, Black and brown communities have been hit so incredibly hard. And it is because there is a lack of trust in the system. It is because there is a lack of education being put out in a way that is digestible for the communities. It is because we are not providing these communities with access to healthcare, right? It is because we are not providing these communities with the tools they need to be successful, and these communities are resilient nonetheless. So it makes me angry, because it's like, when this vaccine goes out, there is going to be this narrative, I'm sure, that, they don't know, so they're not going to get it. And then the disparities between health, education, health outcomes, comorbidity, all of those things are going to continue to widen. And I want to be hopeful. I want to go from that spring of hope and build from this knowledge and move forward with that. I know I'm getting a little off, but the piece that we're doing in January is going to be it's part 3 of the winter series, and it is called Health of Our Protest. And it is really about Black fatigue in the Black Lives Matter movement, and how our art can be used as both a protesting mechanism as well as a healing mechanism, and how does that work? And then and I will need both of your help in this. I'd like to stack our panel with Black resiliency experts. How do we uplift the Black community? That is my mission for January, because I feel really strongly that we need to start out the year in that place of, where do we go from here? How do we build upon the foundation that we already have? We know we're resilient, but we infuse our bodies with support mechanisms and resiliency that is going to propel us into this next year of uncertainty.
So when you speak of this, I see Sonia Renee Taylor, who specifically on radical self-love, and does a daily or so post. What's up, y'all? Is how she says it. And in one of her what's up, y'all's, I would say about a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, she talked about, I think it was before the election, and she talked about how everybody's looking to, this new administration as this sort of saviors, but actually, like, while yes, that's all of that is good, like that's good progress. However, what did she say? She said, turn your gaze to those who are already marginalized, to those who are like this country is actively trying to kill, and see how they are thriving. Learn from them and bring that into our society. Yep. So I offer that as a way to start thinking about this.
No, that's fantastic.
What you're saying is very, very much aligned.
That's what I would say to organizations. That's what I would say to folks who are like, how can I be a part of this? How can I help? I feel like the folks who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So listen to them. They have been living with this. Something I learned about in the process of writing The Fun Shack is this constant idea of necropolitics, that there is political decisions that impact whether people live or die have been so prevalent during this pandemic. And it's been so, we talk about the earned lack of trust between institutions and communities. And there's a whole way in which I think white supremacy kind of, it cordons off our imagination. So we can't quite think of, it is inconceivable that there are other ways, you know what I mean? And that there have been other ways that have been successful, that did actually work. I think of a Weeksville, I think of the Saratoga Village? That might be the wrong, but I think of a Weeksville, and I think of other communities of free people of color that existed, actually in Virginia, next door to DC. Some of the highest land ownership amongst free people of color was happening during slavery, and like during the height of slavery. And I'm like, wow, we don't hear about that. We don't hear about these little enclaves that were all over the country of people who were curious about solution-based, community-oriented action, right? And the survival, invested in everyone's survival. I think the necropolitics of what we're seeing right now shows there are some people who are okay if other people die. You know what I mean? Like they're not, there's something about how they're conceiving of the situation where they're not putting two and two together, that the decisions that you make could kill people or they could live. You know what I mean? But it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing that we can't get to the or they could live part. And like, what happens when they live? It's something about
the
that.
quality of their living, right? I mean,
yes.
Something about that.
I think, I continue to look at New Zealand with Jacinda Ardern, who's the prime minister and just won her another term.
Oh, right.
That is her whole approach, is like, not only are we going to survive, but we are all going to thrive. And that means that if one of us thrives, all of us thrive. That we need to be thinking about all of us as a community. I think that there's something to be learned there, and that that is there's a nation that is quite diverse, and somehow they have found, and I'm sure not everything's perfect, but like they have found ways to actually honor many different cultures as New Zealand culture. Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, and I don't think that started with her, but she's definitely taking it to the next level, I believe. That is also happenstance, the like one of the very few countries that have incredibly low COVID cases, like in the hundreds as opposed to 100,000s.
Yeah, you made me think of just like the name Elevate, right? The reason I think that is because rising tides raise all ships, right? There's not about elevating me or one or two artists. It's about elevating the community rooted in knowledge, rooted in action, rooted in information. And I think that's how we move forward, with everybody having a seat at the table.
So speaking like I know that we had sort of talked about, we're coming to a wrapping up. We're getting to a place of wrap up. We didn't talk very specifically about concrete actions, but I think that was woven in. So I'm going to move to the last question, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And since you were talking about the future, and the future can be now, the future could be 10 years from now, right? But if I liked what you were saying, Christina, about 2021. So I would like to my big question is, what does a racially just and liberated world look like? And I'm going to tack on, if you have a vision for where we are going, what is next in this next year to help us strive for that?
I was thinking about this question, and I was, the wonderful thing about public health that I've learned is that it's this really intersectional and vast space, because everything kind of relates to public health, from clean water to bike lanes, right? Like, it all sort of has a lens in public health, and it all impacts our communities. And so what I think a just society looks like is really around access at these intersection points. It's about access to education and healthcare and housing and work and right. It's not about, if we equip our youth with education, then they will thrive and they will make their own pathways towards housing and work and healthcare, et cetera. No. All of these things need to be integrated together, and we need to look at them from that 360-degree lens and truly give access to those things. And when access is level and available for all, I think then we can really talk about how to optimize and make sure that communities thrive. Mm. And I don't know what that looks like specifically, what are the steps to get there? But one of the steps I'm trying to take with Elevate is by creating free, accessible spaces for people to imagine and get involved where they can, where they have access, where they have desire, go ahead and dig in, but then recognize that it's all intersectional, right? Everything is connected. So if your issue is food access, which is our next piece, or environmental justice, like, know that actually is racial justice as well. Know that actually is access to healthcare. Know that actually is access to education and to housing, et cetera, et cetera. Like, all of these things are inextricably linked, and we have to think of it that way. And you may go down one rabbit hole, but know that you're impacting other areas of these systems that are oppressing people.
There's a lot of inward looking that I think needs to happen. People need to make some decisions about, how do they feel about Black excellence? How do they feel about history? How do they feel about patriotism? Like, I think there needs to be some soul searching that people need to do individually. I think the world, a liberated, free space, is local. It's who lives near you. It's, you know where you get your food from. You know how to create renewable energy sources. You're able to be self-sufficient and in community with other people. You're able to self-police. There's curiosity and joy, and people love learning. Learning is cool, I feel, in a radical future. Economic cooperatives, urban agriculture, these are things that we can do and have done, and people are doing. And there's a resurgence of people who are like, cooperative economics is like, that's kind of how we did things. So they're reclaiming that that legacy. And I feel like it's so powerful. It's so powerful. I cannot stop thinking about that Fannie Lou Hamer quote where she talks about, if you have a quart of gumbo in your cellar for the winter and you're able to feed yourself, nobody can tell you what to do. Nobody can push you around. You know what I mean? And so this is something that I'm like, I see this in the future. I see people being like, you know what? I'm taking responsibility for my land, for my community, for my body, for my mind. I'm taking responsibility for these things. And then I am contributing. So there's healing and then contribution.
Mm.
I like the idea of, really digging into the what did you call it? Communal economy?
Cooperative economics.
I had parts of the words. Communal economics. I mean, that just honestly goes against capitalism.
I mean, I think that we have to name that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm also here for like reclaiming legacy and bringing that into the fore. And I just want to thank you both for taking the time to have this conversation, to share your work. I'm all about it. I'm so about it. And congratulations to both of you on the success of the first session. And I can't wait to see how the series continues to unfold. And I'm again, like, ridiculously honored to be in communication, community with both of you.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here.
Such an honor. Such an honor. Love it. I just love to see just the melanin, the femininity, the dynamism. I'm like, yes, put me in more Zoom rooms like this.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Well, you never know. We'll continue. I mean, this is not going away. So thanks again for joining me, and thank you to everyone for watching Teaching Artistry with Courtney J. Boddie. This conversation and more will be on the audio platform. So if you have not already, subscribe to SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And we're going to be reclaiming, we're going to be endeavoring, building community, because we won't go back. We can't go back. Onwards.
Now is my time to shine. When your time comes, don't postpone it. When others doubt and out, you don't condone it. Truth be told, yourself is your toughest opponent. When your moment comes, grab hold and own it. Never let go, stand tall and hold tight. Overcoming obstacles is the objective in life. Doubters all the night, and unto them you shine bright. Cause inside your head, on goes the light. Ignite.